I think there's always ebbs and flows. And I think, especially as an entrepreneur and in the early stages, right, you get huge wins and then you've got huge valleys where maybe you lose a contract or a customer experience isn't great, right? And I think that's really the reality of the startup journey, right? You look on LinkedIn or on Instagram and all you see are the flowers and the roses and everything's great and our company's doing great. The reality when you get down and dirty with it is that it's hard, right? Some days are good, some days are a little bit tougher. And I think figuring out what matters and what you need to prioritize. And sometimes, right, when I was coaching, it was the same thing. You learn a lot more in losses than you do in wins, right? You win a game, everything's great. We're an amazing team. We're going to beat everyone. You lose a game, oh, we're terrible. We can't beat anyone. But the reality is those games you lose, you can pick up 3, 5, 7 things. Hey, if we had done these things better, we would have won that game.
Welcome to A Founder's Life, and I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. My guests and myself share our entrepreneurial journeys and our methods for a balanced life. I'm joined here today by Marc Kerrest. Marc, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. My name is Marc Kerrest, like you said. I'm founder and CEO of GPS DataViz. We automate insights out of performance data for sports teams. And so it's a journey I've been on for a few years now. I did have a background in finance, but grew up playing soccer. And so very much focused on helping athletes stay injury-free and really achieve peak performance.
Excellent. So talk to us a little more about the journey that brought you to where you are today, and then a little more about how your tool really helps athletes and the teams.
Yeah, for sure. So, my background's a little complicated. I won't take too much time, but moved around a lot as a kid. My dad is French, so grew up in France for a while. Was a huge soccer fan, so grew up playing soccer. Had season tickets to PSG as a kid when I lived in Paris, and I followed the game my whole life. I played college soccer at a low level, and when I was done with college, went into finance. So I spent 15 years trading commodity derivatives. Focused on analyzing a lot of data and using historical data to help forecast kind of the future, right? No one can predict the future, but looking at historical trends and trying to analyze that data. Obviously did a lot of data analysis, trading commodity derivatives, and ultimately came back to soccer. Started coaching a little bit, always been really excited about sports. And so in my past, when I was coaching a team, we had GPS and heart rate monitors for our athletes. And we had a head of strength and conditioning who would break down our data and send us reports, an hour or 2 hours after training. He left and the new coach didn't know how to do that. So the head coach turned to me. He said, hey, you're pretty good in data. Why don't you take a look? And so I spoke to our old strength and conditioning coach, who's now our VP of Performance Science at DataViz, and kind of what are the metrics he's looking at. And so he showed me his Excel spreadsheets. I maybe undersold a little bit how much I'd used Excel. And so I did his process for a couple of days. And quickly realized, okay, I think I can automate this and do this a little better. And that's kind of how our company was born. And so, the reality these days is sports teams are collecting so much data encompassing the performance of their athletes, whether it's on-field wearables or testing in the gym, a lot of different facets to it. And it, ultimately it takes them a lot of time to analyze that data and really make sense of it and optimize the use of it. And so what we've seen is, people become performance scientists or strength coaches because they like working with athletes. And so we've kind of automated the analysis of the data for them and spoon feed them the insights that really drive performance and keep their athletes healthy. And we automate that in under a minute. So really trying to give those practitioners time back, kind of automate the analysis so they don't miss any steps. A lot of times they have a pretty good understanding just by looking at the data, what the data says. But, they might have missed one guy here or there. And those are really what makes the difference, right? At the professional level, it's really that little edge they're looking for. And so we kind of try to help them make sure their athletes are performing at their best.
Sounds like a great service. And I know you've worked with some pretty top teams.
For sure, yeah. So started in the college ranks, started in college soccer here in the United States. Again, that's kind of my background. I quickly saw that, the football, European football, soccer here in the U.S. is not the biggest market. So we now do 10 different sports. College is still very much our bread and butter, but we do work with professional teams in the NFL, NBA, NHL, NWSL, WNBA, so across a number of professional leagues, and then even down to the high school level. And I think that's what we're seeing. As the cost of the hardware comes down, you're starting to see this technology that used to be used exclusively by professional teams. Now it's really everywhere in the college space and even trickling down to the club landscape and the high school landscape, where practitioners really don't have the time or expertise to break down the data. And so we automate that for them and make it really effective and useful for their athletes.
Nice. And as a Brit, what kind of football teams are you working with?
So in European football, right now we are talking to a number of teams in the UK. I think it's a new market for us. I actually just got off a call this morning with a Swiss hockey team who's looking to adopt their technology as well. So that is a new market for us. We went across in October of last year and started meeting with teams. We are talking to teams at the Premier League and Championship level. But here in the U.S., we work with a number of teams in the NWSL, actually over a quarter of the league, including Orlando Pride, who were champions last year. I think they went 24 games unbeaten. So again, I don't think we can take huge credit, but we like to play a small part in that team's success. And obviously having your best players available and performing at their best is a huge part for any team.
And what does family mean to you?
Family is the foundation of everything for me. I was fortunate that I met my now wife when I was working in finance, when I was living in New York. I grew up in a very close family, still very tight with my parents and my siblings. I do have 4 children myself now. So, today is the 3rd of July. Tomorrow's a holiday. I have been traveling a lot in June. For work, June was very intense. But always trying to kind of spend some time with my family when I can. Actually, we host a big party tomorrow for the holiday with a lot of our friends in the neighborhood. And it is really, throughout the family. It's friends who, maybe my daughter is friends with them in school, but then we become friends with the parents. And, I think family is the foundation of everything, right? Obviously, I am very driven in my career and always looking to achieve and be successful. But I think ultimately, that the family is what grounds you and what you're doing it for, right? And so finding that balance, right? I think it's tough. Sometimes I do have demands for my job, but making sure that I'm always prioritizing my family at home and making sure that their needs are met.
Certainly my big belief. And how about health? So whether that be mental health, physical health, nutrition, fitness, how does health look for you?
Obviously with the company we have, and just my background in sport, I believe, mental health and physical health to me go hand in hand, right? I think being active really helps settle the mind and helps you stay focused. My journey as an athlete has evolved quite a bit. When I was young, I did play quite heavy high league soccer. I did have a number of injuries, which kind of contributed to me wanting to build a platform like this to keep athletes healthy. I played soccer for a long time and did have a few injuries there. These days I don't play soccer anymore, unfortunately. I kind of just watch my kids, watch some games, and I do miss it a little bit, but I think the injuries are a big part of it. I have moved on to, I do some triathlons now where I can kind of encompass, some of that competitive spirit. And, for me, swimming is something I came to a little bit later in life. I had a pretty traumatic neck injury playing soccer and had some issues with my neck and my shoulders. I was actually rehabbing from an Achilles tear and started swimming. And so that kind of made me comfortable in the water and have done some triathlons over the years, really enjoy not just the competition aspect, but I think working towards a goal, right? I think it's nice to go work out and be able to work out casually. I think for me, that extra motivation when I know I'm competing for something makes it a lot easier. I am still consider myself to be a competitive skier. I try to get out there as aggressively as I can. And so for me, it's, how am I maintaining my body? I've had a number of injuries, and I think anytime I can do stuff to mitigate the impact and to make sure I'm staying active, I think it ties together, like you said, kind of the mental health aspect. I think regular exercise is key really to stay focused and grounded, right? The mind can wander a little bit, but I think regular activity really helps focus that. And it all kind of goes hand in hand with nutrition and those types of tips, sleep. I do wear an Oura Ring to track kind of, what I'm doing on a daily basis. Yep, for sure. And for me, I think it was a big tool to really see the impact things have, right? If you have a glass of wine or two at dinner, right, your resting heart rate isn't going to get close to what it usually is. Or if you eat something late at night. And so just seeing that data in real time, again, I do work for a data analysis company, but just seeing that data in real time helps you kind of curb your behavior and, makes you have an extra think, hey, that ice cream is good, but do I really want that ice cream right now? And what's the impact going to be on my sleep? And it all kind of goes hand in hand, right? You sleep better. You wake up the next morning feeling energized. You can get a better workout in. Your mental health is strong. You're able to focus at work. So I think a lot of those things really tie into each other, and it's something I strongly believe in.
Sounds like some similar beliefs. And what do you like to do for fun?
So like I said, I think right now I am pretty focused on my business. So a lot of my free time is spent with my family, and then, for me, my free time is, can I get some activity in, whether it's a long run or a swim in the ocean, or going for a long bike ride in the winter, I definitely do try to get skiing as much as I can. It is something I do with my family as well. I taught all my kids to ski. I guess the rule in our house was my wife said once they could walk, I could teach them to ski. So they've all been skiing since before the age of 2. So that is definitely something I enjoy in the wintertime. But it's really just staying active. I think I spend a lot of time behind a computer. I spend a lot of time managing people in my company and making sure we're moving forward. So, for me, when I'm away from that, I'm either spending time with my family, helping my kids grow, helping them learn something, or really staying active myself. I do play a little golf, although I'm pretty terrible.
And for you, how does a balanced life look? Because I think that you obviously have a lot you're doing. And when I talk about a balanced life, it's not permanently imbalanced because none of us are. But, that center line between, how does a balanced life look for you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you identified it and kind of hit the nail on the head, right? I think the reality is, right, I'm running a startup. We're a growing company. We're really looking to push the envelope both on the product side and in growing our customer base. And that is a big commitment, right? I have a commitment to my employees. I have a commitment to our customers. I have a commitment to our investors. And so it does tie up a lot of time. But I think on the flip side, it's finding those times when you can find downtime and lean into other things, right? Like I said, we have a 3-day holiday weekend. I think I spent more days traveling in June than I was at home. But a few of those days when I got home from a trip was a 3-day trip with my family when school got out, right? And now that we're coming into a holiday weekend, we're going to host a big party tomorrow with all our friends, spend the weekend with my family, and try to find those ebbs and flows when I can really lean back into the family, because I know that there's times when I'm kind of obligated. Hey, I have this commitment for work, and sometimes that has to come first. So finding those down times when I can lean into other things and really find that overall balance, right? Obviously, in an ideal world, time was infinite. You would have time for all those things, but the reality is, right, there's only 24 hours in the day. Like I said, sleep is a big part of it too. So you can only cut corners so much. You want to make sure you're getting a quality sleep. You want to make sure you're spending time at work. Want to make sure you're spending time with your family, and some days have to be more focused on one than the other, but really making sure that everything's taken care of in the big picture, and you're looking at it in a holistic.
Nice. And what has been a pivotal moment for you in your life?
It's a strange thing to say, but so I guess 17 years ago now, I was playing, men's league soccer with some of my college teammates, pretty high level, and had a pretty traumatic neck injury, like I referenced earlier. Just got upended in the game, kind of landed on the back of my head, ended up, fracturing a vertebrae in my upper back, tore labrums in both my shoulders. So it was something that took me a while to recover from. I think, you could see that as a negative, but I always try to find the silver lining. And a couple things were positive that came out of that. First of all, I'd started dating my now wife about a month before then. And when I had this injury and I kind of recognized, it took a couple of days to recognize the severity of the injury. I told her, hey, I think I'm in a little bit of trouble here. You probably should just go do something else. And, when I'm doing better, maybe we can reconnect. And she never left my side. So I think maybe things happen for a reason, and she's now my wife, and we have 4 beautiful children. So kind of to me cemented how invested she was in our relationship. I don't think I'd ever had a relationship up to that point that had been that serious, and really showed to me how much she cared about me. And obviously has been impactful since then. And then, the other thing for me was, like I said, I was working in finance at the time. I was very focused on my finance career and, very motivated, but I think it gave me a chance to kind of reflect on what I was doing every day. And if that was really, at some point the doctor told me, hey, if you'd rotated another 5 to 10 degrees, you would have probably died on the spot. And I didn't believe her at the time, but, I ended up having 2 surgeries and did about 2 years of rehabilitation. At the end of that window, I said, she's probably right. And so the thought was, if my life had ended that day, would I have been happy with what I was doing and what I was focusing all my time on? Again, I continued to work in finance for some time after that, probably another 10 years. But I did start to think about, okay, finance isn't the be all and end all. I think I'm successful here. I met a lot of great people. Obviously, was successful financially for myself and my family as well. But really thinking about the big picture and what do I want to accomplish in life? And I think that got me back on the journey back to coaching, which I found a lot more fulfilling, working with young athletes, helping them achieve their goals, kind of working with a team. And I think even my time coaching really helped me now that I'm working in a business, right? And leading a team in a different way, right? Not on the field, but in a business endeavor, really helping align people and see, that there are differences in the team, but that those can make you stronger. And how do I get everyone working in the same direction and make sure we're greater than the sum of our parts. So I think that was kind of an inflection moment for me. And again, I'm not going to say it was easy. Definitely had some tough times around that injury, but I think allowed me to evaluate where I was at and kind of make some bigger decisions and kind of, look at my scope going forward.
Sounds like that was definitely part of your journey. And I think all that has gone before, the good and the bad, is what makes us who we are today. So I think it's all there for a reason. And what's one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
I think you kind of nailed it when you talked about balance, right? I think there's always ebbs and flows. And I think especially as an entrepreneur and in the early stages, right, you get huge wins and then you've got huge valleys where maybe you lose a contract or a customer experience isn't great, right? And I think that's really the reality of the startup journey, right? You look on LinkedIn or on Instagram and all you see are the flowers and the roses and everything's great and our company's doing great. The reality when you get down and dirty with it is that it's hard, right? Some days are good. Some days are a little bit tougher. And I think figuring out what matters and what you need to prioritize. And sometimes, right, when I was coaching, it was the same thing. You learn a lot more in losses than you do in wins, right? You win a game, everything's great. We're an amazing team. We're going to beat everyone. You lose a game, oh, we're terrible. We can't beat anyone. But the reality is those games you lose, you can pick up 3, 5, 7 things. Hey, if we had done these things better, we would have won that game. It's the same as a startup entrepreneur, right? You're working on things. Sometimes you lose a deal. Okay, what can we learn from why we lost that deal? Is there a functionality that we didn't have? Was something not working properly? Was our pricing off? And so it just allows you to fine tune what you're doing and really keep growing, right? And I think that's the reality. I tell my kids all the time, practice makes what? And practice doesn't make perfect because you're never going to be perfect. But we say practice makes better. And so anytime you can get more reps, you can fine tune what you're doing, you can improve. And just having that growth mindset and taking the ebbs and the flows, right? That's part of it. And how do you come out at the end of the day on top?
Excellent. Very true. And how can people find you?
So, obviously social media is a big thing these days. Our website is www.gpsdataviz.com. You can see it right behind my head there. I am on LinkedIn, Marc Kerrest, or it might be M Kerrest. I'm on Instagram as well. I used to be on Twitter, but not as active there anymore. So I am on social media. And then if anyone wants to shoot me an email, I am available, marc.kerrest@gpsdataviz.com. Always happy to talk to new entrepreneurs. I think it's really helpful when you are doing something new to have kind of that ecosystem and that background of founders who you can talk to who are probably dealing with the same problems you're dealing with, right? It could be a completely different industry, but ultimately on a day-to-day basis, they're probably struggling with the same things. So I have tried to build up kind of my network of people who I can rely on or bounce ideas off of, and always looking to grow that network and help others who are kind of going through the same journey.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your taking the time. And let's stay in touch. Talk to you soon.
And thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and please leave a review.